Thank you so much for joining this presentation. I'm going to start very shortly. I'm just going to give people a few more moments just to join and get themselves sorted. But a warm welcome to our Revision Parents Forum for GCSE History. So I'm going to kick off now because I think I've given people enough chance to join. So a very good evening to you and thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm going to be giving you a whistle-stop tour on how to revise for GCSE history. If you do have any questions during this forum, then you are more than welcome to send me an email. I will be monitoring my emails as well this evening. My email is on the screen. It's plarkin@rodingvalley.net. And as I said, this session this evening is going to be entirely about how to get yourself ready for your GCSE history. So I thought what would be really helpful is to give you a brief run through on what the course itself looks like and just a bit of a reminder that there has been an element removed due to COVID. So altogether in history, there are 2 exam papers and no coursework. You have a paper 2, which is about the Cold War and the Anglo-Saxon and Norman era. And we also have a paper 3, which is based on Weimar and Nazi Germany. You can see that there's no paper 1. Now, there is normally a paper 1 in a normal GCSE year, but obviously due to COVID, then the Department of Education has decided that paper 1 is to be removed. So therefore, there is no paper 1 unit. Luckily for us, we only taught a small section of it anyway, so we didn't really waste any time. So therefore, we were in quite a good position as a school to take on this change from the Department of Education. So just to remind everyone, we've only got 2 papers in history. We do a Cold War superpower paper. And on that paper, you have the Cold War unit, and then you also have your Anglo-Saxon and Norman unit. So it's quite difficult because you have to go from the modern to the medieval, all in the space of an hour and 45 minutes. And then paper 3 is all about Weimar and Nazi Germany. And that's the one that we've been learning lots about at the moment. Just to let you know, as parents, we are very nearly finished teaching the content for both of these papers. We've taught the entirety of the Cold War and we've taught the entirety of Anglo-Saxon and Norman England. And we're 3/4 of the way through our Weimar and Nazi Germany. So we'll be finished in very, very good time, ready for the summer exams with plenty of time to revise. And you probably already know from speaking to your children that we are already revising in history. We teach what's called an interleaved curriculum, which means we don't stay on the same paper for the entire week. We actually go between the Cold War, Anglo-Saxon, Norman England and Weimar and Nazi Germany to keep that knowledge refreshed constantly. Okay, so moving on then, I'm just going to give you a brief demo on where you should start in regards to organising yourself for GCSE history. So as you could just see from the screen there are 3 big units to get your head around. You've got the Cold War unit, you've got the Anglo-Saxon and Norman unit, and of course you've got Weimar and Nazi Germany. So where do you start to get yourself organised? Well, I believe that the best place to start is to get yourself onto our website, and I'm just going to click you through this. Get onto our high school section of the website, click on the revision resource tab, which is what I've just done, scroll down and get yourself onto the GCSE revision microsite. We've already spoken a lot about this as a school. Your son or daughter will already know what this is, but we think it's really, really useful that you start here when it comes to history. You'll find that, but if you click on the drop-down menu at the top here and you scroll down, you'll see that there is a history page amongst all the other subject pages. And you'll see that if you scroll down, we've got our PLCs that are linked here, our reading list here, textbook links here, and the revision guides too. Now, can I just point out that the textbooks are particularly useful to your child? They are the whole course in one book, divided really nicely into key topics and units, and they're a brilliant place to obviously get in front, brilliant resource, to have in front of you to complete that revision. So I just wanted to share that the revision microsite for history is incredibly useful. And if your child is missing any notes from their exercise book, then obviously they can hop onto the microsite and they can download the materials that are on the screen there. And for example, if I was to click on the Cold War, Textbook, it opens as a PDF, which is great. You scroll down and you'll see a bit of a blurb, and you'll see the contents page, and it breaks it down chapter by chapter with all the little subheadings for you. So it makes that revision easy to condense. Okay. So back to my main page then. So you've got yourself organised, you've got yourself onto the microsite, you know where all the resources are. So where do you start in terms of getting your own stuff together? Well, the history department would always say, make sure that you've got your exercise books for all of the papers that you've studied. Your child should have a minimum of 3 exercise books for history. They should have a Cold War exercise book, an Anglo-Saxon and Norman exercise book, and a Weimar and Nazi Germany. And that's a minimum. They should have a minimum of each one of those books full of class notes, full to the brim of class notes, because we do so much work during the lessons. They should also have hard copies of PLCs, personalised learning checklists, for each paper that they've used, that they've ticked off as they've gone through the course. Now, if they don't have a hard copy of the PLC, you've just seen that on the microsite. You can click on there and download them and print them off again if you need to do so. They will also have hard copies of brightly coloured revision guides that we have made as a school for your child. So they're Roding Valley High School specific. They've got a Cold War one, an Anglo-Saxon and Norman one, and a Weimar and Nazi Germany one too. They're really brightly coloured. From memory, they are red, green and blue, and they will also be in their history folders. Again, if your child has misplaced theirs, there's a copy on the microsite that you can have as an e-copy. But if they want a hard copy, just tell them to speak to their teacher and they will give them one as soon as possible. And lastly, they'll also have access to the e-copies, and I've just showed you that, on the microsite for each paper. So again, we have plenty of resources to get yourself started. You don't have to go trawling through the internet, and you certainly don't need to buy any revision guides because you've already provided those for your child. So I thought I would be very specific this evening and give you 3 ways to revise for each one of the units that I've just spoken you through. So even though there's only 2 papers for GCSE history, one of the papers is split into 2 units, the Cold War and the Anglo-Saxon unit. So I'm going to give you 2 different ways to revise for each one of those. Now, the Cold War is one of the units where lots of students tend to find really, really difficult. It's normal. It's absolutely normal that they find these difficult. And this is because the content is very political. It's very much economic. And it's also quite tricky in terms of understanding the narrative of the course. And there's so many events that are involved within the Cold War. So therefore, as a department, we think the best way to revise the Cold War is to create a table like the one that I've done on the screen, whereby you look at all the events that you've studied. And again, if your child is not sure about which events they've studied on the Cold War, then get to the textbook like I've just shown, get to the little subheadings in the contents page and make sure that there is at least one sort of row on the table for each one of those subheadings. And all they need to do for each one of the events of the Cold War is to make sure that they can complete one cause of the event, at least one major event of the event, so what actually happened, let's say, during the wartime conferences, and then lastly, the consequences and the reason why that event was important. Now, the reason we like the students to fill in tables like this is because each one of those headings links to one of the 3 exam questions that they are asked for this unit. So basically what we're doing is we're preparing them for all eventualities, because they could get an exam question on any of the events of the Cold War, and they can be asked to discuss the causes, the main events as a part of the narrative question. They can have the consequences of the event, and they can also be asked why it's important. So this is perfect for exam technique, and it means that they won't have any bases that are left uncovered if they revise using this method. Okay. Now, just to let you all know that in lessons this week and next week, we're actually going to do one of these tables as a class together. So we're going to start them off with this, but there's absolutely no harm in starting this independently as a revision technique in the background when they're doing their own independent study. And it means, like I said, they will have all bases covered for the Cold War unit. Like I said, if they are not sure on a big chronology of all the events, they can either get their exercise book in front of them and use the lesson titles to complete the table. So they've got all the events from the lesson titles, or of course they can get the events from the textbook, which is on the microsite. And once they've got those, they'll be away because they can fill it in and think, well, what caused the wartime conferences to happen? What happened during the wartime conferences? And then, of course, what were the consequences and the reasons why these conferences were so important? Okay, so it's a great way to revise for the Cold War. So, secondly then, a part of paper 2, you also have your Anglo-Saxon and Norman unit to do. And the students will also have 3 questions to complete on this unit as well. Now, I think the best way to revise for the Anglo-Saxon and Norman paper is to complete Booz and mind maps. I think mind maps work really, really well with this unit. Now, the Anglo-Saxon course is based around 3 key topics, and the 3 key topic headings are the first page of the textbook, again, which can be found on the microsite. Now, I would strongly suggest that your son or daughter creates 3 very detailed Booz and mind maps on each one of the key topics for this paper. So the key topics are on the screens. They have one on the Anglo-Saxon and Norman conquest, so that goes from 1060 to 1066. The second unit is all about William I in power, so the Norman king. He's just taken over England. What does he do to secure the kingdom? That's between 1066 and 1087. And lastly, the last unit, is on Norman England between 1066 and 1088. So what I would suggest is that your son or daughter completes 3 big Booz and mind maps on each one of these 3 key topics, and they look at the heading in the textbook and use the subheadings to create the branches for the Booz and mind map. And then from memory, they challenge themselves to think, well, what can I remember about Anglo-Saxon society? What can I remember about the last years of Edward the Confessor, etc., etc.? Because these little branches are going to trigger them to have thoughts and to recall some of that intricate knowledge that's very, very much useful when it comes to approaching the Anglo-Saxon and Norman unit. Now, Booz and mind maps, we really like doing them at Roding Valley, and they work perfectly for the Anglo-Saxon and Norman paper. Okay, so this is a great strategy to use, and I would strongly suggest that they approach the revision like this when it comes to revising for this unit. As I said, if they have notes missing from their Anglo-Saxon and Norman exercise book, if they are worried about not having enough content, then of course they can get to the microsite, click on the textbook that's on there, and they'll have this page in front of them. And then any knowledge that they're missing, they can of course fill in using the content that's available in that textbook. They can also obviously use the revision guide too, but what I will say is the revision guide is a condensed version. The textbook is much more detailed, so it really depends on the stage of your son or daughter's knowledge when they are revising. Okay, so just as a bit of a recap then, I've just talked you through the Cold War revision strategy, which is using the table on the screen, and then the Anglo-Saxon and Norman paper revision strategy, which is to use the Booz and mind map technique. Now, last but not least, we also have the Germany paper, which is our paper 3. Now, I believe that the Germany paper, the best way to approach this in regards to revision is to make some cue cards, and I think it works really well for the Germany paper. Now, again, the Germany paper is divided into key topics, but rather than 3, there are 4 for this unit. And again, the headings for the key topics can be found in the textbook, which is on the microsite, linked into that microsite. Okay. Now, what I would suggest is rather than using the headings from the key topics, they use the subheadings. So they work through the subheadings in chronological order that are on that contents page, and they make a cue card for each one of those subheadings. So on the back of the cue card, they would have the title of that subheading. They would flip it over and they would write 3 to 5 bullet points of knowledge that are linked to that key topic. I also suggest that they draw some sort of image, some sort of symbol to represent that subtopic. Okay. I also think it's a great idea once these cue cards are created for your son or daughter to give them to you, maybe a sibling, anyone that they've got at home that they can do this with. And for you, as the person that's not obviously taking the exam, it'd be great if you could have the cue card in front of you. They can just see the back, and that you test your child on how much they know about that key topic. And it's down to them to try and recall at least half of what's on that cue card. If they can, they get to keep the cue cards, they get a point. If they can't, you keep it, and it works as a bit of a competitive game. And whoever's got the most cue cards at the end of the series, of course, wins. And it's the aim for your son or daughter to get as many of those cue cards as possible, because they need to try and recall all of the information that they've written onto them. What we always say about cue cards is that students normally like writing them, but they don't always like using them. So that game is an application sort of task. It's a way of actually challenging them on, do you even remember anything you wrote down about that subheading? And having that game there is a great way of testing application. So I am going to round off this evening with a couple of things. And the first thing I'd like to round off with is that we as a department want to say thank you to all the parents for their continued support of the history department. So I first of all want to say that history is a difficult GCSE. There's lots of content and your son or daughter is doing a very good job to be on this course and to be trying as best as they can to revise for the content. We also want to take this opportunity to sell our YouTube channel. So we do have a YouTube channel as a department. You can find it by going onto YouTube, typing in Roding Valley High School, clicking on our YouTube channel, and then you'll see all of the different channels that we've got. And one of them is called Mr. Cocker RVHS History. You'll click on that and you'll see lots of videos from us. You'll see videos from me. You'll also see videos from Mr. Cocker, and you'll see videos from Mrs. Preston on some of the key content from the GCSE. Now, Mr. Cocker has recently uploaded a mini lecture series as well on the Weimar and Nazi Germany course. We've got one on there about the Anglo-Saxon and Norman course, and we also have a whistle-stop tour of the Cold War. We also have videos on all of the exam technique as well, so that if your son or daughter is struggling with any of the exam technique, they can watch a video, potentially while they're having a go at some practice questions in the background, just to keep them on track and just to give them the confidence that they need to carry on revising. So please, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. You'll get notifications when we upload new content. We do upload new content quite regularly, especially as we approach the exam season, and we will be uploading more material as we get to our PPE season as well. So please do subscribe to that. I also want to take this opportunity to let you know that your child will have also received this week and next week during their history lessons an exam practice booklet for each paper. So for each paper, so for paper 2 and for paper 3, we have a booklet that is full of exam practice questions, mark schemes and model answers. Now, the only reason we've only just recently handed this out again, and we did hand it out at the end of year 10, but we've done it again now, is because we think that lots of our students are now ready to start applying their revision. So we know that lots of our students have already completed the Cold War table for revision. They've already done mind maps on Anglo-Saxon and Norman England, and they've already made cue cards. So now it's time for them to actually apply and use this knowledge to apply to exam questions using those booklets. So I also want to mention that they were handed out this week and also next week during their history lessons. If they don't have one of these practice booklets, please tell them to go to their history teacher. Obviously, they can come and speak to me directly as well. So thank you so much for attending this live stream. I really, really appreciate your support, and I know that the history departments do as well. This recording will be available on our microsite if you missed anything and you want to play it back again, along with the presentation that I've been through this evening. Again, thank you so much for your continued support.